Kate Falcho, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. And I have a gigantic welcome to my honored guest, Dr. Callum Cooper. Welcome, Cal.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, listen, it's a delight. I think it may be actually a miracle that we finally connected. It's some sort of paranormal event, I think. I was really beginning to fear that I was going to have to wait till I was dead before I'd be able to communicate with you.
No, I get there in the end.
So for anybody who may not recognize the name, because it has been a little while, you edited this or you consulted on it?
Yeah, I had to. That is the original 1979 book, Phone Calls from the Dead by D. Scott Rogo and Raymond Bayless, republished. It's been edited. A couple of errors have been corrected. It was retyped out again, and there is an extended postscript as well, which talks about what has happened in the 40 years since that book was published.
And then this book that you wrote all by yourself.
Yeah, so that was following me reading the 1979 version as it was when I was an undergraduate student at university, doing a few articles, looking at what was going on with modern mobile phone technology, because we just got into the era of the iPhone. I started university in 2006, 2007, and that's when the iPhone came in. So we were starting to get into smart mobile phone technology. And there were some interesting updates, people saying they'd had strange text messages and things like that.
Yeah.
So I'd rediscovered this book. I'd looked at all their other work by Rogo and Bayless, but then realized this joint thing, this joint writing piece, the only joint writing piece they did. And thought, well, wow, they found 50 cases back then in the 1970s. So why don't I look at another 50 cases and analyze them through social science using standard social science methods again? And eventually it became, well, make a book, make it a sort of part two, a follow-up, and it acts as that. So that is essentially the second volume. So whether anyone finds an original 1979 copy or gets that modern reprinting, Telephone Calls from the Dead, my own book, is the second part.
Is this the original?
That's the original, yeah.
Oh.
I mean, if you wanted to really play geekiness and follow sequence, you get that and read it and stop at the postscript. You read Telephone Calls from the Dead and then go back and read the postscript.
Right.
That's the order.
I'm at fault here. I didn't really tell anybody like what you are besides an author. You're a psychologist. Is that right?
Yeah. So I'm a psychologist first and foremost. I specialize in parapsychology, which is looking at exceptional human experiences, so abilities and experiences which in principle seem to be outside of the realm of conventional scientific paradigms, conventional ideas and theories. But we look to conventional ideas. We look at what psychology already knows that makes people think they're having a strange experience, and we see what's left. But I also cover sexual behavior, death, dying, and bereavement, positive psychology, cyber psychology. Police misconduct is something that I've been researching more with colleagues in crime and justice, and domestic abuse of men. But I'm also at the Californian Institute for Human Science. I'm here in the University of Northampton in the UK. In America, the Californian Institute for Human Science. I co-direct parapsychology education there with Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove. And I hold a professorship there in parapsychology and public understanding of human science.
Do you do that all digitally, or do you actually travel back?
Yeah, I mean, there's a physical campus for the CIHS, but they are a distant learning postgraduate institution, just like the CIIS, which I also do classes for. So that's the Californian Institute for Integral Studies, which is in San Francisco. And they are largely distance learning. But again, they have a physical library, physical campus, but they are mainly for masters and doctoral students.
I have always said that I felt that there's a continuum with advanced, experimental, whatever you want to call it, physics on one end and metaphysics on the other, and rapidly, they're approaching in the center. And I was excited when I read in your book that you can get a degree in parapsychology. Is that the official discipline?
But you can get people have joked about it with, you could get a degree in Britney Spears and things like that. Well, you can essentially, but what people are talking about are not taught degrees where it's a load of modules, units, and you pass exams and coursework pieces and stuff. Typically here in the UK, when you do a higher degree, a research degree, you are walking into the university with a question that you want to answer, and then you just write about it and collect data and research it for several years. So the title is whatever you make it to be: golf course management, how shopping carts are made, the history of beer mats, whatever you want it to be. So yeah, you can get a degree in anything. But parapsychology, there have been some taught master's courses in the past. At the CIHS, we have got a master's degree route, a concentration in parapsychology, and people doing PhDs as well. At the University of Northampton, we just offer, for any subject whatsoever, a route to doing PhDs, but people just turn up with a topic, or we get research grants and we need people to collect data on a certain topic. So we offer that out and people apply for it. So yeah, parapsychology, of course you can get degrees in it, and one of the earliest PhDs in it was back to the 1920s and 30s at Duke University, under the supervision of Joseph Banks Rhine and Louisa Rhine, and it was in mediumship by John F. Thomas, and he wrote some books on his thesis afterwards.
I didn't know that there was a conventional track in this area. Had I known, that would have been my cup of tea, I'm telling you what. Which kind of leads me to one of my questions that has just been, I'm dying to ask you this. What kind of reception do you get from your university peers? Not necessarily in your field even, but just in general. When you go to a faculty cocktail party or something and they ask you what you do, what kind of a reaction do you get?
Well, people always love the mystery behind people's strange experiences, but generally we're not testing like every Eurogella that walks through the door bending spoons, or people that say that they dream the future all the time. We test the general population and see how good they are at ESP experiments and things like that, or can they remote view? Can they tell us about distant events, either now or before they happen? At the university, we get the absolute height of respect. If it wasn't for parapsychology, a lot of standardized methods in psychology either wouldn't have developed or would have taken many years later to develop. So parapsychology brought in significance testing, statistical significance. It brought in shielding and randomization. Later on, it was pioneering meta-analysis, which is where you study a whole group of the same kind of subject, same kind of research studies, and you put them all together, the successes and failures, and a meta-analysis tells you how good the overall effect is, and things like that. So we've also made quite a lot of advancements in understanding altered states of consciousness as well. Yeah. So if anyone has studied parapsychology, you know you've got someone that's generally very good at statistics or sifting qualitative data, and they're also a very good critical thinker, because they've got to look at all the conventional possibilities and then also be able to sensibly determine what have we got left as well. And so that they don't necessarily take things for granted. They need to critically think through everything. So we get really, really respectful reception, because of it being a sort of a founding strand of psychology. A lot of founding fathers of psychology were involved in parapsychology.
Yeah, and there's more rigor involved than the entertainment world would lead you to believe. I think
two different entities entirely.
Yeah. They laughed at Copernicus too. What can I say, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fascinating that some of the people that I've talked to, who are the most open-minded about this entire field and other associated topics, are actually hardcore scientists. It's very interesting to me, because I always used to think of scientists as being somewhat entrenched and digging their heels in and having a lot hanging on espousing the conventional point of view, but actually they're much more open-minded. It was a surprise for me. So it's good to hear that you're not facing a lot of pushback.
No, I think that's decades gone by. I think the only thing that niggles some parapsychologists, and I do say some, and then some other fields as well, like alternative medicine and stuff like that, are some of the I'm a hardcore skeptic working on the inside, but you get these outside groups of skeptics who just seem to deal with every topic I don't know how you become a master of every topic and seem to have some sort of authoritative voice on it. But that seems to niggle at some people. But a lot of that's been exposed with regards to wiki not reading correctly, having very strange information on there on bios or the history of things in parapsychology, and really obsessively bizarre by whoever's editing them. But people like Craig Wheeler did a journalistic kind of overview of what was going on with Wikipedia and the battle for the internet and banning of TED Talks on parapsychology topics.
Oh, really?
So there's people that are disgruntled by it, but they're not the inside scientists. They're not anyone that makes any difference. That they might be a keyboard wizard, but that's about it. I've never met any of these people face to face, so it really doesn't matter, really. Whatever job you've got, just because there's someone down the street who doesn't like you, well, so what? That's absolutely fine. Just stay away from me.
Well, you mentioned, that there's a lot that has been better understood now about the nature of consciousness, and people who 40 years ago were considered, a little questionable, are now actually looking back. They were talking about things that quantum physicists are talking about. The person who comes to mind for me, because I just covered a lot of his ideas, was Philip K. Dick. I mean, people thought that he was just completely gone, and now they're saying, well, actually he was right. So I find that fascinating, and I think that's an object lesson in keeping an open mind about things, not being so quick to reject ideas.
Well, look at Darwin. Darwin's a prime example. Other people would be Isaac Newton,
Galileo.
The refusal to look through the telescope. I mean, that's exactly how it's been described. That there is an organization called the Galileo Project, and it's about science that's on the edge and pushing forward. But it's also about this battle of people that say, I refuse to look at your data. I refuse to look through the telescope. It's that mentality. But again, those people that you're trying to convince, is it even worth wasting your time over it? Because are they going to actually make a difference? If they're giving that kind of attitude, well, that's not the scientific standard, and it's certainly not a skeptical approach either. You should be brave enough to look through the telescope and then discuss it.
Well, I think it's my impression. What do I know? You can confirm this if you've got a take on it. But it's my impression that many people who are sort of traditional, middle of the road in most disciplines have too much invested personally in keeping the status quo going, and are afraid because, if you've published a lot of books and given lectures and traveled the world as an expert, and suddenly your expertise is put to question, I can understand. I don't agree with it, but I can understand why they would be reluctant to challenge their entire work from their lives, of course. Yeah. So let's talk about you, because I'm really curious what got you on the road to be interested in this whole field.
Well, my background was performing arts and theatre, and I had a passion for that, and I did street dance and all sorts of things like that. I have very much a photographic memory, which helps me with academia and names and dates.
You're one of those.
Yeah,
and it's
everything's
obnoxious.
up here. Okay, everything's up here, and I only have to hear a conversation once, and I can repeat it word for word. So I'm very good with scripts, and as I went through education, I think my parents also kind of really tried to encourage, well, get a degree in something else, something that's useful that you can fall back on in case the work's not coming in for acting, if you go down that route, which was sensible. Because, you'd be doing anything to make sure you've got an income, so you'd be doing all sorts of jobs. And my main passion was theatre. As much as people want to be the next movie star or whatever, I love old theatres. I love treading the boards. I love just the atmosphere and the emotion, positive and negative, and the spooks and the scares and the romance that you get from an old theatre.
Well, make my day for me. Tell me it was musical comedy. You were no.
Oh God, no. If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you did but slumber here as these visions did appear, a weak and idle thief. Yeah, no more yielding, but a dream. So it's all that kind of stuff. And I went into college doing psychology, photography, electronics, did some sideline stuff in general studies, filmmaking, British Sign Language. There's all sorts of extracurricular stuff. And then when it came to picking universities, I had always gone to the library at school, so up to the age of 16 with friends. We did it once a week. The school took us down to the local library, and there was a section that had 5 or 6 paranormal books. And one of them was the Osborne Book of Ghosts, which was really cool.
Oh,
at the
yeah,
time.
we have
Yeah,
that.
and it mentions Harry Price, it mentions Borley Rectory, it mentions the haunting of Cashin's Gap, which was regarding Jeff the Talking Mongoose. But it tells you about Bigfoot and aliens and stuff. They had those versions of the books, Fortean phenomena, and that always fascinated me in early ghost photography and what people made of it. And I discovered, seeking out the universities, that there was such a thing within psychology called parapsychology, where you can look at these kinds of experiences that people have. So I'd gone to Liverpool Hope University, that had a good department at the time. It now doesn't exist there, but the people that were there are now working in parapsychology elsewhere. And one of those was Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, who does Uncanny, and I appear on Uncanny for the BBC now and then. Coventry University was doing a master's program in parapsychology at the time, so I went to look there. Hertfordshire, that was the first time I met Professor Richard Wiseman, who now is a good close colleague and friend. But Northampton absolutely felt like a home from home, really. There was something about it. It was such a friendly community and atmosphere. I picked that as my undergraduate place of study for psychology, and ended up sticking with it. I did all my degrees there. I went away and did a master's degree after my bachelor's, went back and did my PhD, gained another PhD after that at Manchester Metropolitan University, where I was guest lecturing in parapsychology and still do now and then. So I ended up staying, and acting just fell by the wayside. But over that time, I've ended up meeting film producers and actors and done red carpet stuff and got to know a lot of people. I met the late Barry Humphries, who used to play Dame Edna, and Celeste Patterson through some of my links with parapsychology. Just incredible. And now, because of what I do and my background, I get asked to do radio and TV and present TV series and stuff like that. I've got so much more filming coming up.
Kind
so
of in the back door of entertainment. Sort of.
Yeah, I get that being at the forefront, but my job now is not to pretend to be someone else. It's just take science and make it publicly digestible and entertaining.
That's a great opportunity,
it's a good opportunity.
Introduce it to the public, right?
Yeah, so just to translate my studies and skills into something else, and I'm happy with that. It's good.
So when you were a child, was the paranormal something that interested you, or was this you had to be?
No, nothing beyond the library books. Maybe my grandmother mentioning certain things about Newstead Abbey, which is 10 minutes away from me. It's the former home of Lord Byron, the poet.
Oh, okay.
And there's like 3 main ghosts there that were always mentioned: the Goblin Friar, Bosun the dog, and the White Lady. And that entertained me as a kid, but I only heard of the stories now and then. And growing up, of course, I was influenced by Ghostbusters, but only a little bit. That didn't stick with me. I just liked the film. I know some parapsychologists where they're stuck with hauntings and apparitions being their forte. They were heavily influenced by Ghostbusters. It wasn't until being an adult that I appreciate the film a lot more, that these were meant to be parapsychologists that lost their job at the university and then set up private practice as paranormal eliminators. I mean, as a kid, that I didn't see it as that. I didn't understand universities or science.
Of course not. Well, Dan Aykroyd's in that movie, right?
Yeah, he wrote it and co-wrote it with Harold Ramis, and his family were members of the American Society for Psychical Research, of which I've got the journals there.
Yeah, he is very active in alternative interests. We'll put it that way.
He is, and Crystal Skull Vodka.
Pardon me?
And Crystal Skull Vodka. That's one of his main things that he pushes.
What is it?
Well, it's a triple distilled by charcoal vodka that's contained within a crystal skull glass. It's very unique. It's a beautiful bottle of vodka.
Oh, I've never heard of it.
Oh, yeah. It's one of his kind of brand things along with the ghosts.
Oh, ghosts and Vaga, of course. It just
Well,
makes sense,
Crystal
right?
Skull. It's
Yeah.
not just that; it's Crystal Skull.
Makes sense. So let's see here. What else do I have that I really wanted to ask you? Um,
Well,
you know,
let
go
me
ahead.
ask you that question. What got you into the paranormal? Was it while you were still small and in Ireland? Because I know there's a hell of a lot of folklore in Ireland. Did that carry with you over to the United States growing up? Did that kind of trickle down through your family, or was
Yeah.
it interest in the United States?
No, it definitely a part of my family. Psychic ability runs in my family.
Right.
And in Ireland, I'm sure you're really aware that the lore, the mythology, it's very internalized. It's very much a part
Mm.
of the culture, and it's taken for granted. My mother used to, I love to tell this story because it's unusual for Americans to hear this. I'd go out in the backyard because I'm older, and um, people used to hang their laundry to dry outside. I know that I still do,
I
but
still do. I still
oh,
do.
good for I love it. So I'd go out in the backyard, and this is in California. I probably grade school age, 10, 11, and my mother would be hanging laundry, but she would be having a conversation in Irish with the trees, and I'd say, "Who are you talking to?" "The little people in the trees. Don't you see them?" And she, and it was a very odd experience, but uh, it became an accepted part of my family life. I never gave my mother a present that was wrapped that she didn't know what was in it before she opened it.
Oh, I love that.
No,
Love it.
well, you might have loved it. I didn't when I was.
Oh.
But
Th-
that was common in my family, was that sort of knowing things. And I've had visitations from my grandmother since she died, and my grandfather had some very strange experiences back in Ireland, experiencing apparitions, ghosts. Yeah, so it's just an accepted part of the culture.
You must be aware of the Irish medium Eileen Garrett,
No.
who, well, she was from Ireland and then was in London briefly, but she emigrated to the United States.
Mm.
She founded the Parapsychology Foundation in 1951 as a medium who became very wealthy through her work and other exploits, and funded a hell of a lot of parapsychology research and encouraged anyone else that professed psychic abilities that if you have them, put yourself to the test. She was forever tested for her abilities, but her best ability was psychometry. So again, touch a wrapped up object, she could tell you what was inside.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer. A firm believer. Well, I was going to ask you something now. What was it before you talked? Oh, I know. The topic of consciousness and near-death experiences, which touches on consciousness and awareness, um, life after death, all those topics, I believe, are connected. And what is your point of view? It's a personal question, but what is your point of view on uh, the nature of our consciousness?
Well, yeah, that's a very big question. I mean,
I know it
it,
is. I can't think of how to ask
then
it in a simpler way because I'm thinking of a whole lot of people that I've spoken with that approach it from different
mm,
directions, psychology, uh, remote viewing, near death experiences, but they're all talking about the same thing. So,
I think about it every day. It's an amazing thing in terms of between life and death. We see a dead bird on the lawn, and moments ago it was flying and it was seeking out food and it was aware of things and it was chirping, and then lights off. So where does that thought and awareness go to then just be a shell? And the older we get, the more we see friends and family and loved ones die. We grow up with the fear of losing our parents, and we know that it's inevitable at some point, whether it happens when we're young or we're old. And we also then think of our own mortality as well, especially every time we go to a funeral, and that ultimately all of us are going to end up inside that box. We will one day. But what happens in that? Do we just not know? If you've ever had anesthetic when you've gone for an operation and
yeah.
they're asking you to count down and you don't get past 9,
Yeah.
Countdown from 10. Okay, 10, 9, gone. The next
So
moment,
strange.
the next moment you're coming to again.
Yeah.
Unless you dream. Some people say it's very rare that people dream. I've been under local anesthetic, and I dreamt quite heavily during the time that I was under it. But for people that don't, is that death? Is that just an instant shutting off, and you just don't know about it? You are pain-free. There's no thought. There's no awareness of you. It is just a nothingness. It is literally everything shuts off. Is that what it is? And then that makes you even more in awe of life and appreciation that every day you wake up and you get to experience a bit of it. No matter how bad the day can be as well. I mean, people can be absolute pains, and we'd like to give them a good shoving or a word and stuff like that when people are mean to other people and stuff like that. But look for the positives every day. Life can be tough, and especially when we start to get aches and pains and stuff like that. But there's so much interesting stuff and good. And when we create our own goals and purpose, life is so much fun. And when we surround our lives with people that we appreciate and make us smile every time that we see them coming, from long-time friends you've had to new ones you make, to your own children growing up and wanting them to stay young forever and embracing their laugh and smile, and when they run into school and come out and stuff like that. Life is incredible, and death just continues to be an absolute mystery.
Yeah.
So when we have near-death experiences, when people say they've seen an apparition of the living or the dead, when people say they've had incredibly accurate information from a medium, when people talk about a young child that's talking about memories of a past life with great accuracy that turns out to be absolutely true. They speak in a language that relates to the deceased, but they've never learnt. They sit at a piano instantly and play classical music at the age of 3 or 4, but have never been taught. But that previous person could, and they were classically trained. What is going on there? Either it's just still an aspect of life and being alive and information transferring from one deceased entity to the next living entity. So things continue and improve and things get slightly better as generations go on. That's the nature of evolution. We improve and adapt, and it aids our survival. But ultimately, death may still be death. It may just be an absolute sleep and silence, and there's nothing going on. I struggle, even as chair of the Survival Research Committee for the Society for Psychical Research, which has been going since 1882. We see grant requests all the time for projects on survival. But as a psychologist, even though I know there's some incredibly good evidence in support of survival of death, we were even involved in the Bigelow essay competitions. I struggle with the idea that there is some sort of continued existence of just being a mind without a body, and what that might look like. So the nature of consciousness to me, I think, is just fascinating. This is all possible because of a makeup of biology and these electrical impulses in the mind, these neurons firing. And we know it can be manipulated in different ways. We know that if I take substances, it will change. We'll know if I hit my head, I get God forbid, a brain injury, it will change as well. All these different slight tweaks will change my memory, my personality, my intellect. And we're all different. We all have different makeups.
Wow.
We all
watch too much YouTube.
Oh, well, there's that. Yeah, there's so much. Look at all the variation we've got. We've got different cultural backgrounds, different cultural beliefs. We've got different sexualities. We've got different sexual desires. We've got different comedy. We've got different interests in arts and creativity. You could show a painting to someone and you love it and they hate it. You could watch a comedian they like and they're laughing their head off and you don't find it funny at all. We're all so different. So different. And I think that's the thing that always keeps me interested in psychology in general, in that as a species we are fascinating and so varied. And the nature of consciousness is a massive thing that we haven't even scratched the surface of. So when I think about questions like that, my starting point is my day-to-day chuntering to myself and thinking about death, but then thinking about how incredible life is, actually, that don't worry too much about the death, focus on the life.
Well, I'm very fickle because I feel like I'm in the process of trying to figure it out for myself. A little late, but still. And depending on the last thing I read, I might have a different opinion. Are you familiar with Stefan Schwartz, who was, okay, we're pals.
Hmm.
And he is constantly correcting me because I'll say things like, oh, well, I'll send you love. And he'll say, well, there's no such thing as time or space. So you're not sending anything anywhere. But it talks about the information in the field and tuning
Right.
into the information in the field. So I think you could very possibly be correct, which would be a gigantic bummer for a lot of people who are interested in my channel, because they put a lot of store in existence continuing after death of the body.
Mm.
But maybe we're just letting that energy into the field and somebody else picks up on it later. But to get back to the book, there was a lot of information in some of those phone calls that seemed to have to do with the future.
Yeah.
But then time has no meaning. So, you know, can you want to talk a little bit more about that? It's fascinating.
Yeah, the thing that pulls them away from a generic call that someone's misunderstood, misinterpreted, and some sort of anomalous thing going on would be when people saw the call take place. There are other witnesses to it, but then the telephone company has no record of it.
Yeah.
And then, yes, specific information that relates to the deceased. So where's that come from when you don't even know yourself after the call, you've got to
Correct.
go on a paper trail and find it out, and it
Yeah.
turns out to be true. And another one would be that sometimes the dead would give warnings of something. So there was a premonition involved as well. And you've got to wait for that to actually come about, to actually realize that that was actually truthful as well. So there's all those kinds of things. There was warning ones even from living individuals. So one of the ones that stood out for me that Rogo and Bayless had written about, they found it in the autobiography of Linda Lovelace, who was in the pornographic film Deep Throat
Yeah. Yeah.
that she was most famous for. So she wrote her autobiography called Ordeal, and it was mainly about the domestic abuse that she'd suffered from her husband, who was also a co-performer. And she said that he was being really abusive one day and dragged her out of the house and just drove with her, and they ended up at a motel somewhere. And she said whenever she was so scared in any kind of circumstance and worried, she knew that her dad would always be there and protect her and support her. So she thought about him driving all this way to God knows where and then ending up at this motel. And then there was a knock at the door, and her husband goes and answers it, and it's her dad, and her mum stood there. And they said, what's going on? And she goes to have a private word with her dad and saying, oh, what's going on? How did you know I was here? And he said, well, you called me. And she said, I haven't been anywhere near a telephone because of the circumstances her husband had sent her through. And he said, you were distraught. You needed my help. You said, come to me, and you told me where you were. Wow. She didn't know where she was going until she got to the motel.
Yeah.
And yet this thinking, this need, this I need help, I need protection from my dad. He's saying that his own telephone rang, it was her, and gave this information. Now, either she's in earshot of her husband and doesn't want him to know. My understanding was that she has this private conversation with her father, but she's either got a chance to get to the telephone and make that emergency call and then denies it in front of her husband, or this is one of many calls that are like this from living individuals where there's an emergency and a need to get that message out as well. So yeah, all these interesting circumstances that play with time, and they're not just to do with the dead. They can be very strange telephone calls with the living that just could not have ordinarily played out. D. Scott Rogo had one of these himself, and quotes it. It was 10 o'clock on a bright Thursday morning, and I thought about making a call to a colleague of mine at the UCLA Neuropsychiatric Institute. Although I thought about making that call, I never actually did. But at 4 o'clock that afternoon, I got the surprise of my life when the telephone rang, and it was the research assistant of the very psychologist I'd thought about calling. He said that he was answering my message. When I asked what in blazes he was talking about, he said that at 10 o'clock that morning, a call had come into them. The caller had left my name, my telephone number, and asked that the call be returned. So that's how they play out.
I'll tell you a story about a friend of mine. I don't think she'd mind if I repeat it a little anonymously. It was Thanksgiving, and she was in a completely different state from her family. And her family, they were from various different places, but they had congregated. She's a completely different state. She gets a phone call or makes a phone call. I don't remember who initiated the phone call, and spoke to this, Great Lakes state for quite a while, spoke to all the different family members, had a lovely conversation. And then hours later, the opposite happened. I can't remember who initiated the second call, and they denied ever having spoken to her.
Right. Yeah. There you go.
So what was that?
What was that?
I know. What was that? I recall from the original book, and I may flub up some of the detail. Well, maybe this is not from this book. I don't know. I read too many books. This man had an adult daughter who was a scientist and a linguist. And she got a brain tumor and eventually she died. They are very closely related. And I think they both had an interest in the paranormal.
Mm-hmm.
And she promised him that after she died, if she could, she'd get in touch with him. And a few days after she died, he got a phone call from one of her girlfriends. And she said, I got the strangest dream last night. And in my dream, the daughter came to me and had a message for you, but it was unintelligible. I don't know what she said. I could tell you phonetically, but it made no sense to me. And he said, well, what did it sound like? And she repeated it. And he went, oh my God. It was in Russian. The daughter spoke Russian. He spoke Russian, but the woman who got the dream, she didn't recognize it as Russian.
Mm-hmm.
How weird is that?
That is also weird.
I love that. That's great.
But that's a nice veridical, we call it veridical aspect to it, where again, that information is so specific, like the language, the shared language and so forth, that adds to a nice level of it rather than just a misinterpreted wrong number or something like that.
And it actually was words. And what she said in Russian was, I will always be with you.
Yeah. And that again, as you've seen, simple calls, type 1 ones are usually about a finality. They're usually about a going away and I love you and everything will be all right. And they're always like a good closing down, ending on a good note sort of call. And sometimes not overly interactive either, when you know that someone has passed away.
Well, a lot of people claim that when their loved one, somebody close to them dies, they see them. They come to them in the middle of the night, like not in a dream, but physically they wake up and they're sitting on the edge of the bed, and have a small conversation and then they're gone. Yeah. That's remarkable to me. I think you could possibly explain away a phenomenon that a lot of people report. A loved one dies and they see that person everywhere they go. They see them in the crowd. They see them in the store. They see them.
Oh, absolutely. You can relate to that though as well, because it's a form of separation anxiety. It's another word for bereavement, separation anxiety. But we get that as well. If you've got, a boyfriend or girlfriend that you absolutely love dearly and, just things have come to a head and you've separated. And, one person may be more distraught than the other. Both might be distraught. It just wasn't working out. It's just no practical way. You start to think you see them everywhere. You go to the supermarket and you see the back of someone's head and you think any minute now they're going to turn, it's them. You get that sinking feeling in your heart when, you think you've seen them, but then actually it's someone else. Because you're so attached and it's on your mind, you're identifying characteristics of that person. And it's usually height, stance, their gait, how they look at light from behind, sometimes even slight side profile, but then face on you go, oh no, it's not them. But it shows how much that they're on your mind in the fact that you'll get so many instances of false recognition.
Yeah, I've been married a really long time and how can I miss him if he won't go away? I'm just kidding.
So you're actively looking for anyone else in the supermarket.
I've never experienced that, but I've heard the story often enough. I fully believe it happens. I wonder to myself, I try to be skeptical within reason. I don't want to be gullible, so I try very hard to look at both sides. And I ask myself, is that essentially wishful thinking? That might not be the right term, but
Yeah, it's up there with wishful thinking, self-fulfilling prophecies and stuff.
Right.
You want something so much and either then consciously or unconsciously it comes about because you're fishing and you're searching.
Yeah. Okay, let's see here. We talked a little bit about scientists who are willing to take these things under consideration.
Hmm.
Science meeting metaphysics. You talked about a guy called Carlo Novelli, or is it Rovelli? I can't read my handwriting.
I
uh,
did.
Pardon me.
I did. I spoke about them.
Well, the book did.
Okay.
Who was a theoretical physicist, and he even said science needs philosophy and metaphysics to progress. How do you feel about that? What do you think about that?
That might have been Rogo and Bayless mentioning that person, because I don't particularly remember mentioning them. But
Oh, yeah.
metaphysics, not necessarily for me. I think psychology and physics go hand in hand.
Hmm.
I'm certainly not someone that would say that religion has no place in science. Certainly for social science, it absolutely does. Because psychology and sociology is filled with different cultures, and understanding how those cultures operate and understanding their belief system is also a big part of that. And even when we then press into anthropology as well. And when it comes to anomalous experiences, a lot of those will bleed over from people's religious upbringing and belief systems and
Hmm.
things like that. So I
Yeah.
think that's the closest I get to the metaphysics side of things, is just an appreciation for spiritual experiences and transpersonal psychology. Every discipline though overlaps, and parapsychology, you can apply it to different ones. I mentioned the Parapsychology Foundation earlier, that was founded by Eileen Garrett, and every year they did a conference that was usually entitled an International Conference of Parapsychology and Psychedelics, Parapsychology and Education, Parapsychology and Communication, Parapsychology and Mathematics, Parapsychology and Thanatology, Parapsychology and Religion, and so on and so on. They did whole conferences on how it married to another topic and what people were looking at. And it's a very good tool to be used for critical thinking and looking at other disciplines. But it stands alone as an area of psychology and physics, because there's a term paraphysics as well. And there's been
Yeah.
journals of paraphysics where we look at absolutely the anomalies within psychology and just focus on those, and the anomalies within physics. Not just areas where we need to take the next step, but ones that have really made us scratch our head. Because these experiences of, well, this person and this person believe that they can actually read each other's thoughts. Well, that doesn't bleed so much into the rest of psychology. That is a standalone issue.
Hmm.
And these people say that they're interacting with the dead. So do people actually survive after they've died? That again is a standalone issue. So parapsychology deals with these kinds of dirty and unanswered questions
Hmm.
that not everyone wants to deal with, but they're incredibly common. They're more common than not, and they're very cross-cultural, and they span throughout time. They go back to ancient civilizations. So yeah, metaphysics don't really deal with it, but parapsychology, I appreciate, overlaps with many different topics, and it's again good for critical thinking.
I may be somewhat gullible, but I am not religious, but metaphysics to me is just our reality not adequately explained yet. I think we will get to where we will understand it. At the moment, it's an unknown, and we
Mm,
explain it the best we can. I don't know how adequate an explanation of my point of view is, but
mm,
uh, I think there's an awful lot that we don't understand. But 2,000 years ago, there was even more that we didn't understand, that's no longer considered mysterious and mystical and weird, and we have a concrete explanation for it. I feel eventually, like I said, physics and metaphysics, they're just two sides of the same coin.
mm.
And eventually, you know maybe we'll be able to explain what we're looking at. Let's see here.
We make such advances with things, even like when you turn to medical science, because even CPR, doing resuscitation on
Yeah.
someone, when we go back like 100-150 years, when that was first coming out, before then, the idea that someone drops down dead and you're able to like enforce compressions and do mouth to mouth and they will come back to life, that was unheard of. That was a miracle when it first started to happen.
That's right.
People did not understand that process. But again, artificial pumping of the heart, getting the nutrients and oxygen of the blood into the brain, getting the oxygen back in the lungs and trying it. Most of the time it doesn't work. But if it does work, well, fantastic. It's all that trying to get the body to do what it needs to do again, even if it's just the sheer banging of a fist on the chest, to get the heart going again, all the way through to defibrillators and get a large electrical impulse in there and shock the heart back into going.
Right.
Pump them full of adrenaline. That's a miracle back then. Now it's not. We understand, well, that's just medical science. That's what it does. The body can be tricked back into starting up again.
Or not even tricked, but in a state that we're not recognizing. Look, especially children who drown in cold water, and they're, for all intents and purposes, when they haul them out of the water, they think they're dead, and yet they now know that that's worth making the effort to resuscitate them, because the cold water actually acts as a protection from them. I mean, that's probably not the right term, but it prevents them from truly dying. It slows down
the heart rate, slows down the movement of the blood process. But at the same time, this is also why we put organs on ice as well. I mean, the ideal thing for organ donation and transfer is to actually do live organ donation, where someone is brain dead, and actually we have got permission to immediately, while they're alive, remove organs so that they're freshest as possible for the new donor. But if you can't, which is most of the time, they need rushing to the next hospital on ice. So we have to cool it right down. You don't want it kind of body temperature or heating up. That's decomposition area. And we don't want that when it's not being fed. So we need to cool it down. So and there's remarkable cases in the late neuropsychiatrist Peter Fenwick and his...
Oh, I love his work.
Yeah, The Art of Dying. You may have seen that book with Elizabeth Fenwick. And there's a few cases mentioned where people
covered it ages ago.
They were in the morgue cooler. They were in the fridge post-death and brought out for autopsy. And these people woke up like they were in some sort of abnormal hibernated state that medical science doesn't recognize. They woke up on their own without intervention of adrenaline, defibrillator, CPR. They just woke up and rushed back to theatre. And that's remarkable, because they were declared dead and put in the cooler. So there's so many things that we don't quite understand. Medical science, just like parapsychology and other areas, is constantly learning and trying to understand that next step.
Yeah, I love Dr. Fenwick's work. I tried to get a hold of him, but he's, some people are a little more elusive. He's hard to find, hard to get in touch with.
He was at the time.
Yeah.
Because, of course, in the last few years, he's passed away.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So unless, again, you've got one of my telephones, you're going to struggle. Pete, unfortunately, I think it was last year Peter passed away, but he wrote with, I think it was with White Crow Books, he did a sort of autobiography before he passed away, which is fantastic. So, and it was the same for Professor Elenda Haraldson, who was a very well-known parapsychologist. So that they've got these autobiographies to survive them.
That makes me very sad. Hope springs eternal. I was hoping he'd live a few more years and I could get in touch with him. He was in his 90s, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. I mean, you've still got Elizabeth Fenwick to turn to. I mean, she'd be fantastic for interview.
Didn't even occur to me. So are you telling me that Michael Jackson was right when he tried to freeze his brain?
There were so many rumors of that. Do you remember the one that went about that Walt Disney had neurosuspension, that his head was, and it was the producers at Walt Disney that had put about that rumor, and the family were furious when they found out about it. But it's what led to the ideas with Futurama, and the idea there are people genuinely in suspended animation where they've been frozen in these full body chambers or neurosuspension.
I know, it's crazy. But then again, look at what they do with fertilized embryos.
Exactly.
They're kept, So who knows? What do we know? We know nothing. You know that, right? We know.
Well, it's a hope and a promise that in the future something can be done about it. Because with the heads and the bodies, it's all about, well, could you be revived in the future? If it's just the head, could there be an artificial body? If it's the whole body, from whatever you died of, could it be cured and you be revived from such deep freezing that it's literally frozen in time of sorts, every molecule in your body, as opposed to general freezing, like the freezer that you would put your food in, that would destroy meat. But meat going into cryogenics, it's such a deep freeze. It's an instantaneous preservation of what's in there. But our hope and pray is that well, can you reverse that process years into the future, and can you cure whatever it was they died of?
Do you find that an appealing thought?
I'm not too keen on the idea that one day my body is either cremated or it's buried. But again, if life after death is just a nothingness, I wouldn't be worried about it, as no one else before has been so worried about it. But I like the idea in a way, but then you are going to wake up in a world where you don't know anyone, and everyone that you have loved and so forth is gone, and you're back again. But then for how long? You've still got to live and die.
One of the promises of life after death is reincarnation. And, there's always that hope in the back of my mind that it'll be a better version, a better model. Why would I want this old version if I could have something, never mind. That's
if you are a human again, anyway, if you are a human, you might end up as a butterfly for 3 days, or you might end up as a hamster for a few weeks. Who knows? No,
I don't think that I think the belief is you don't downgrade when you reincarnate. You might cross reincarnate, like on the same basic level, but maybe on a different planet. I don't know. Okay, so I want to pick your brain and find out if you've had personal experiences of unusual contact.
Unusual contact?
Phone calls, emails. No, nothing.
No. I've spent many a time going to haunted locations, and a few odd things happening with moving objects and stuff, things thrown, and you never see the starting point. And on some occasions I was there with police officers that were very freaked out by it. And the objects that you picked up were really hot to the touch when you picked them up. But I've been involved in lab studies a lot where I've got very successful scores. But I think the thing that fascinates people more are the day-to-day experiences. I was just doing X when Y. And I've not particularly had those, but
no calls from your grandmother on the phone, right? Nothing like that. So nothing from your co-authors. You never.
No, I've heard there's a couple of people that believe. Well, Raymond Bayless's wife believed that she had experiences after he'd died, and I know of a couple of people that I'm just about to interview soon that knew Scott Rogo very well, that believe that they had some after-death communications regarding Scott. But not as many as I thought would actually come about from the parapsychology community. And I, like anyone else, I dream quite well when I am having good sleep. And I've dreamt of people that are long since dead, but I've also dreamt of people I've never met. I've had some incredible days out with Billy Connolly or Ozzy Osbourne and stuff like that, and I never met them, but the dream, you're like, wow, this is very real. And it's when you come around from it, you're like, do I know them? Did I know them? And you're like, no, it was a dream, but my goodness, that interaction was great. It's like I did know them.
No precognitive dreams.
I think the best one I ever had, and it's just the one that's that distinct, was I must have been younger than 10, and I think my mother was still working as a midwife then, and she got
your mother was a midwife.
Yeah, midwife for 40 years.
I want to talk to her. Okay, go ahead.
And we've talked about moon phases and heights in birth during full moon phases, and unusual behavior during full moons and stuff like that. And so anyway, I was younger than 10. She was still working, and one of her longtime friends, who was also a midwife, she got a son. He's a few years younger than me, and we were agreeing to meet up to go down to London in a few weeks' time, but we hadn't really planned out what we were going to do. In my dream a couple of weeks before, I dreamt that I was in this room that was not dark, but it wasn't overly well lit. It was, the lights were down for some reason, and it was like with the rope that you get in queues outside nightclubs and anything like that. We're in a sort of a rope in
like Disneyland,
like Disneyland, or in airports and stuff like that, just to make you wait and go back and forth. And we're doing the back and forth zigzagging, and she's taller than me at the time, so I'm slightly looking up to talk to her. And I'm wondering, well, what are we waiting for? And I'm in my dream, I'm looking to the head of the queue, and there's black London taxi cabs cut in half like Herbie where it's just the back end, and they're all moving along, just loads of half of the London taxi cabs. So 2 weeks later come about, and we go down to London. I thought about this dream and couldn't figure out what it was, and I think I'd even told my mum about it. And we decided to do a few things, and one of the combined ticket things was to go into the planetarium in London. And if you did that, you could go straight through an entrance inside to then begin a whole tour of Madame Tussauds Waxwork Museum. Yeah. And so we do that, and we do the first bit, and then we decide to do the Chamber of Horrors, and we go through that, and then it comes out to a sort of an ending, and you can either exit and go to the gift shop, or you can do a final bit of the tour. And so we decide to do the final bit, and we start to queue up for it and realize the final bit isn't a walkthrough, it's a ride. And I'm suddenly in the right place at the right queue to have a sort of a deja vu moment. And I say to my mum, I've been here before, and then suddenly realize I've dreamt of it before. And lo and behold, what's at the front of the queue? What exactly are we queuing up for? In the ride, you sit in the back of a half London taxi cab and ride round the rest of the waxwork exhibits. There was no magazine I'd seen, no billboards, no adverts on TV, but it wasn't like an incredible premonition where it saved my life or anything. It was incredibly mundane.
Random, yeah.
Yeah, but that's the only one that stuck out to me that I've ever had like that, where I thought, my goodness, that was absolutely to the point. But never experienced it before. You can't say that was cryptomnesia, because I'd certainly not learned that before. I was very much in the exact place in my dream that I was in reality later on. So it's not bits of information that turned out to be true. It was an experience that came about to the exact.
I've had precognitive dreams, but the most dramatic one I had happened in California. I was living in Santa Barbara, working in a hospital, and I dreamt that I was standing on the steps of the mission in Santa Barbara, and looking towards the ocean, and I saw an airplane come down and crash behind palm trees, and I woke up, and that kind of freaked me out. But that day I didn't work till 3, and my friend and I went to the beach fairly close to the airport, and we're lying in the sand, and I finally said to her, I have to get out of here. These airplanes going overhead are stressing me out. Wait till you hear this weird dream I had. So I told her the story, and she said, oh God, okay, believe, and went home, got ready, went to work. About 3 o'clock, we start work. About 3:15, she comes up to me, pale, and she says, Helen, have you seen the newspaper? It's in the nurses' lounge. And I said, I haven't had time. I just got here. I'm busy. She says, when you have a second, go look at the paper. Front page of the paper, exactly what I described, an airplane going down behind palm trees. And it happened in San Diego, the Mission City.
Right.
And I went, oh. She was very psychic too, so the two of us just said, oh. If you happen to dream about an airplane that I'm going on a flight, let me know ahead of time. Yeah. And I think lots of people have those sorts of premonitions and they dismiss them. I pay attention to them.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wrote an article for the Fortune Times magazine. I suppose it's the UK contender to Fate. So this is the American Fate magazine that's been going since 1948. And I wrote about celebrities' experiences. There was a number of people, like the singer Sting from The Police had ghostly experiences, and the time the poet Benjamin Zephaniah, but Ozzy Osbourne was in there as one person. He dreamt of the death of Princess Diana a couple of weeks before it happened, but many other people did as well. People dreamt of 9/11 before it happened. There were loads of premonitions of the Titanic before that happened. I've just been involved with Britain's X-Files on Sky History, the Sky History Channel, and we covered things like Aberfan in Wales, where the coal slick on the side of the hillside covered the school on the last day.
I was a child when that happened. I was roughly around the mean age of the kids that died, and I remember how traumatic that was. Oh
my goodness, yeah! Like a couple of adults or so were in it, also, and the rest were children. An entire community's young population.
Yeah, and some of those children knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, and other people did, and other people had spoke of the dangers of the coal slick as well. So just like Titanic, there were health and safety warnings already. there. And we talked about Dr. John Barker, who was a psychiatrist, a member of the SPR, who was fascinated with the premonitions. In his initial call out for people, it was between 72, 74 premonitions had already been documented before it happened, before the event that he got hold of. And then after that, it formed the Premonitions Bureau. And
it's very hard to dismiss those sorts of things.
Oh, yeah.
It's easy to ascribe them to, strange causes, but you can't dismiss them because they're documented. So do you have any premonitions for us here in the United States?
I think one of my premonitions for you is I will come back and talk about some other topics. I think that's a certain. I'll talk about flotation tanks, or we could discuss Titanic in more depth.
Oh, I would love
some unusual psychics. So that'll be my premonition for the listeners and the viewers.
Okay, and I predict that I'll hound you until you do.
You'll get me again. Eventually, don't worry.
I never give up. I've had other people accuse me of stalking them almost.
Okay.
in a joking sense.
It works. It gets the media done. Well done.
I have a career in journalism in my later life, right? Listen, I really appreciate you doing this. I know you're pressed for time. I know you're an extremely busy person, and it's just been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
Likewise, it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure for me too, and I'm holding you to it.
I will be back. There's more things happening with the phone calls from the dead books and projects that are coming up.
We never really got to them, did we?
Well, there was bits that, that's a teaser. You've got both books. Now your viewers have seen them as well. And there's some projects that I need to fully get my teeth into in the next couple of months that will play out throughout the rest of this year. And I've got more TV projects that I'm filming, including stuff relating to the Aberfan disasters as well. So I've got more things that I'll update you on email, and then it might become a topic of discussion next time.
I'll hold you to it. Thank you. And let me say goodbye to everybody. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate it. And Slonga foil.